What's up everybody, Jared here with carbuzz.com, and today I am bringing you a review of the 2024 Land Rover Defender 130. So, just for clarification, what is a Defender 130? Well, when the Defender first came out, you had the 110, which was kind of the normal four-door sized one. You also had the 90, which was the small two-door one. And now, based on historical Defender nomenclature, you have the 130, which is an extended version of the Defender that is longer, giving you more space inside. And I want to be right up front and honest by saying that this one that I'm showing you is technically a 2023 Defender First Edition, but Land Rover has already come out with pricing and information for the 2024 model. It's basically a carryover. So at the very end of this video, I will give you pricing for the 2024 model, because it doesn't make sense for me to price out a 2023 model when what you're going to be ordering at this point in time is already going to be a 2024 model year. So let's start by talking about this first edition, what you get, what's unique about it. So the first edition only came in 3 colors. You could get this Fuji white, you could get red, and then you could get a gray as well. It's kind of funny that every Defender I've driven has been white, because it is a look. It is kind of like a stormtrooper-like look. But the interesting thing is they've added this extended bright pack. So that is going to be all the stuff that you see down here. It's finished in this Ceres silver is what they call it. So it gives a very different look than when this stuff is finished in black. It just gives it that very posh, very luxurious vibe that you don't necessarily get from a Defender. You can get all of this stuff blacked out, like this sort of construction grid pattern thing here on the hood, this little lower part of the windshield, that can all be finished in black, and that just gives the Defender a very different vibe. I actually kind of like the bright finish. I think it really does give you that more luxurious, fancy vibe, but it might not be for everybody, so you can get the wheels and all of those lower portions in black. Now let's talk about one of the most controversial portions of this Defender 130. The added length there at the back. So this vehicle is over 13 inches longer than the Defender 110, and you can really tell there in the back. It is just kind of extended. I'm not gonna lie, I don't love the proportions on this car. I think it looks a little awkward, especially there at the back. I wouldn't say ugly, I just think that the 110 and the 90 are a little bit prettier and a little bit better proportioned. And the weird thing about it is you'll see that the wheelbase, that's the distance between the front and the rear wheels, is actually the same as the Defender 110. So unlike when Chevy takes a Tahoe and turns it into a Suburban, or a Yukon to a Yukon XL, or a Ford Expedition to a Ford Expedition L, Land Rover probably didn't have the budget to extend the wheelbase. I'm just gonna go ahead and guess, because all they did was kind of just extend it from here back. And that is going to result in some rather weird stuff when we get in the inside, but I'll talk to you about that a little bit later. Here at the back, we've got a very similar vibe that you're going to see on the 110. We've got this kind of weird Land Rover square here. You can get some like accessories, like some storage on the outside of this. We've got our spare tire with the big Defender cover, and I love these taillights. I think they're so cool, especially when they're on. You just have that cool square design. You've got your Land Rover badge on this side, and then you've got your Defender badge on this side. And as I mentioned, this one that we're reviewing is the 2023 Defender First Edition, but we're treating it like a 2024 model year. So the reason why so many people choose a Chevy Suburban over a Chevy Tahoe is because you get a lot more space behind the third row of seats. But unfortunately, because Land Rover only made the back longer and they didn't extend the whole wheelbase, we've got some kind of weird packaging issues here. So behind the third row of the Defender 130, you're gonna get 15.3 cubic feet of space. Now, admittedly, that is more than what you're going to get in the Defender 110, which only gives you 10.7 cubic feet. But really, usability-wise, it's not a huge difference. You only get this kind of little gap here behind the back. So this is nowhere near on the level of something like a Chevy Suburban or kind of even a Chevy Tahoe when the third row is up. So you still don't get a ton of room back here, but it is a little bit better than the 110 where you really have no room behind in the third row. Now putting the third row down, we start to see a little bit more space. Now interestingly, unlike a lot of third rows, you can actually drop this one 40-40-20 rather than just 60-40. So you can drop down just that middle part. If you needed to extend something in the middle there, you can have people sit on the outside. You can kind of have them separated. It's just kind of an interesting way to do it. But as you can see, the Defender has some packaging issues. So we've got this big sort of box here. These seats really do not fold flat. We do get a decent amount of space. You get 43.5 cubic feet of space, which is about 10 cubic feet more than what you're going to get on the Defender 110. Now you can't fold the second row from the trunk. You've got to come around here to the rear doors. You just pull those tabs. That makes it easy enough to do. Now we're gonna go ahead and come on this side, open up the door, pull this little tab, and it folds down. That's nice and easy. And you'll see that the amount of space we have is pretty big, but it is nowhere near flat. There is a sizable gap from where this third row is to where that second row is, and that is to do with the way that Land Rover has packaged the seats. They went for kind of a stadium feel where each row is progressively a little bit taller than the row in front of it. So not great if you're looking for a flat load space. We do get a little bit more storage overall than what you're gonna get in the 110. But actually it's not that much more. You get 80.9, so just under 81 cubic feet of storage. You get 78.8 in the Defender 110, or that gets lowered to about 69 if you get the 3-row Defender 110. So honestly, even if you get the 3-row Defender 110, you're not getting a ton more usable space in this Defender 130. And if you get the Defender 110 as a 2-row, it's almost negligible. In addition to the extra cargo volume, you might want to get a Defender 130 over a Defender 110 for the additional passenger space, both in terms of passenger room for each passenger and the number of passengers that you can actually bring with you. Obviously, you can get 2 in the front, you get 3 here in the second row, but unlike the Defender 110, which has a 2-seater third row, the Defender 130 can actually fit 3 people back there in the third row for a total of 8. Now, the 130 is not available with a bench seat, which I believe is only available on the Defender 90, but just thought I would point that out. So here in the second row, Land Rover actually says you get just over 36.5 inches of legroom in all 3 rows, which is about 2.5 inches more than what you're gonna get on the Defender 110. So that does become pretty noticeable when you sit behind yourself here. I've got plenty of legroom no matter where I sit. I've got a very flat floor here, so even this middle seat is actually quite comfortable. One weird thing that I've noticed here, we do have our climate controls and our air vents, but all of these down here are blank switches. They don't open, there's nothing in them. I've been in a Defender before where these are all kind of USB and charging ports. I'm not sure if this was just like a manufacturing thing with the chip shortage, why these are blank here, but just something I wanted to point out. I am going to reach out to Land Rover for clarification on that to see if all Defender 130s have blank switches there, but I will let you know if I get an answer there. We do have heated seats back here, no ventilated seats here in the second row. Now getting into the third row is an interesting challenge. So you're going to use this upper pulley here, and that is going to allow you to slide the seats forward. By the way, these seats do slide and recline in place, which is quite nice. But here's the problem. That gap is not very big. I'm gonna go ahead and show you as I try and get myself in here. Oh, it is very tight. It's a very small opening. A child might not really have a problem getting in there, but as an adult, not great. So let's go ahead and get in this seat. and I'll show you some other problems with it. So this seat is now not all the way back. You can see that this one is all the way back, so there is a little bit more room that I could slide and recline this back. Now, in terms of leg room, I'm actually really good. My knees are not even close to touching. The problem is that my feet are having to be inboard a little bit because that is the wheel well here. As I said, the wheelbase was not extended at all, and that might have been a problem, because if they would have extended this wheel back a little bit more, then my foot wouldn't be on it. So with two people, it's not that bad because I could kind of sit in, as could this person. But if I had a third person sitting here, now look at this. Now my one foot is going to have to rest on the wheel well while my other foot sits down there. That's just a little bit annoying. At least we do have air vents back here. We've got heated seats as well. I've got my cup holder here. I believe that this is another blank where a USB should be. Again, I'm really not sure why this particular Defender that they sent me doesn't have USB ports back here, but I believe that is where they should live. And we do have our own manual sunroof to get some light. So there are a decent amount of amenities back here. Up front, we aren't going to see too many changes on this Defender 130 compared to the 90 and the 110. This is the first edition, meaning that we have pretty much the most luxurious cabin that you can get in the Defender 130. We've got full leather interior, and this is really nice leather. It does feel very Range Rover-like. I really like this light interior, although on something like a Defender where you have kind of that off-road pretension, this might not be the easiest color to keep clean. Luckily, there are other options available. And something that's a little different from the other Defenders I've driven, even these edges are leather. It just gives you that full soft finish. You can get sort of like a cloth material here on the edge on lower trim Defenders. That is going to be a little bit more durable at the expense of luxury. Now, we still have our rubberized floor mats, again, that off-roading pretension. We still have this kind of industrial chic looking door with these rivets. My girlfriend did not think these were very cool. She thought they kind of made it look like a Lego car. I think they look absolutely awesome. We've got our Meridian audio system that sounds fantastic on the upper first edition Defender, and there we have our first edition plaque letting us know that we do have something a little bit special for the first model year of 2023. I'm going to go ahead and push the start button, which is here on the dash. Everything else here, pretty similar to what you'll find on another Defender. We've got our 11.4 inch touchscreen here, our Pivi Pro system. You've got wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto. I think it is a really nice system. We also have some really cool functions here where we can look at our vehicle dimensions, so you can go ahead and see like how much longer the Defender 130 actually is. You can measure that in both meters or feet depending on your market. We also have our wade sensing, which is a really cool feature. So if you go ahead and go into some water with the Defender, it'll tell you exactly where that water line is so that you don't go over it. Overall, it's a pretty great system. We do also have a digital gauge cluster here that measures, I think it's 10.5 inches. The gauges are very clear and concise. You have a bunch of different configurations as well that you can go ahead and use. So this actually changes into a D panel, and then I can go to display layout, and I can make it one dial instead. So now I can have a map on the one side, my dial in the middle. So a bunch of different ways to configure this. It's actually not my favorite setup for this. It is, I think it's just a little unintuitive to change what's on here. You kind of have to dive into a few too many menus to change it, but I think most owners are just going to pick one and they're not really going to change what's on it too much. So it's really not too much of a big deal. We do have heated and ventilated seats. You can control that with the climate control here. So this is going to control your temperature. You go ahead and push it, and now you can control the heated and ventilated seats using this dial. These dials also control the fan speed. So you go ahead and click this fan button. Now it controls the fan speed. Click it again, goes back to temperature. Or you push this button and now it adjusts your different drive modes. So we've got comfort, eco, and then we've got a bunch of off-road modes. So we have grass and gravel, mud and ruts, sand, rock crawling, wading, and a configurable mode. So a bunch of different modes that we can switch to. We do not have the dynamic mode. You actually have to get the V8 engine for that. The only sport mode that we have is here on the shifter. So go ahead and put it into drive, tap it over. That's going to put you into sport mode, and then you can also manually shift from there. There are no paddle shifters on this Defender 130. I believe you have to get the V8 engine for that. Overall, I love this cabin. We've got this white powder coated material here on the steering wheel. We've got a little bit of it here on the door. We've got it in this nice cubby, which, by the way, I love this cubby area. It actually goes behind the screen as well. We've got tons of storage. We've got our wireless charger here. We've got storage that goes underneath in the center console here. We've got more rivets here. It's just a very functional but durable cabin. Because we've got third and second row seats behind there, you can go ahead and flip this. You can see that your view out of the back is kind of obscured if you have a bunch of passengers, but now magically it isn't. And of course, on a vehicle like this, we've got a full panoramic roof that goes all the way into the second row, and then another sunroof is there in the third row. And perhaps my favorite feature here in the armrest, we've got the refrigerator. Absolutely love that feature. All right, now let's get the 2023 Land Rover Defender 130 out on the road. And straight away, I want to point out that maybe one of the positives of the fact that Land Rover didn't extend the wheelbase for this Defender 130 model is that you really don't notice the extra size of this particular vehicle versus the 110. You definitely notice it over the 90 because that is so much shorter. The steering is very similar. You've got that big giant steering wheel here with very light effort, nothing too crazy here. It's definitely not the most precise steering in the world, though it is much better than something like a Jeep Wrangler. As is the ride and the overall comfort. We've got standard air suspension on the Defender, rides beautifully. It's kind of like a middle ground between something really rugged and something really soft, like a Range Rover. I think that the new Range Rover is actually a little bit too soft for my liking. It actually doesn't really settle in with the suspension. This is just a really nice balance of rugged, capable suspension, but is also really soft and compliant out on the ride. It's a really great daily driver. And now let's talk about the engines, because that is a really interesting conversation here with the Defender 130. On both the 90 and the 110, there are 3 different engine options, but on the 130, there are actually only 2 engine options. So the 90 and the 110 are both available with a turbocharged 4-cylinder that Land Rover calls the P300. It produces around 300 horsepower, but on this Defender 130, even the base model is going to have a 3-liter turbocharged inline 6, also called the P300. So they use the P300 name on 2 different engines, a turbocharged 4-cylinder and a turbocharged inline 6, but they both produce around the same power. Here in the Defender 130, that base P300 model is going to produce 296 horsepower and 347 pound-feet of torque, good for 0 to 60 in about 7.5 seconds. And I just don't think I've ever seen that before, where a company offers 2 base engines that one is like physically larger than the other, but they both produce about the same power on different trim levels or sizes of the same vehicle. Just a little bit weird. Interesting to note that if you get the base inline 6-cylinder Defender 130, it produces as much power as the other smaller models with the 4-cylinder, but you get 2 extra cylinders. Weird. Now, the one we're driving is the P400. This is probably the one that I would recommend buying, especially if you're going to be getting a Defender 130, which is a little bit longer and a little bit heavier than the 110. You still get the same 3-liter turbocharged inline 6. It's also a mild hybrid. I'll talk about that in a minute, but it produces way more power. 395 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque. That means in the Defender 130, instead of 7.5 seconds to 60, you'll get from 0 to 60 in just 6.3 seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and come to a stop. I'm going to put my foot on the brake, foot on the gas. Ready? Let's go. Ooh, smooth. Ooh, that is a smooth sounding engine. Buttery acceleration. The 8-speed automatic transmission, great. You can barely feel the shifts. It does so well. Yeah, it's just a really good engine. That mild hybrid assist, that I mentioned is filling in the gaps when you shift, which is really nice. When you put your foot down, it is helping out the engine as much as it can, and it really helps with the start-stop on this car. So if I bring it to a complete stop, you'll see the engine is going to shut down. Barely felt that. I take my foot off, boom, fires right up the engine. Super great. That is some of the best stop-start that you're going to get on a vehicle that's not actually a true hybrid. Now this inline six is great. Even in normal mode, it doesn't have a dynamic mode. You have to get the V8 for that. It has plenty of torque, plenty of power. If I go ahead and put my foot down, the transmission, like I said, it's super smart. It can downshift super quickly and give you that burst of acceleration that you need. But if you like to live on the wild side, you can get the Defender 130 as what Land Rover calls the P500. So that's going to be their 5-liter supercharged V8 engine. This engine is not going to be around for much longer because on the Range Rover, they've already switched to a twin turbocharged BMW engine. So get the supercharged V8 while you can if you still want it. It sounds great. It makes a glorious noise. Although something that I will note, that the P500 model is not as powerful as what you'll get in the Defender 90 and the Defender 110. I believe they call that the P525. It's still the same engine, but it produces like 518 horsepower. In the Defender 130, it's actually detuned a little bit to 493 horsepower. So just something to keep in mind. If you get the long boy Defender, you're actually going to get a little bit less power from the V8 engine. Now, that V8 engine is still plenty powerful. You'll get from 0 to 60 in just 5.4 seconds compared to 6.3 in this inline six model. So it is still by far the quickest way to get a Defender 130. Now, unfortunately, I didn't have time to take this Defender off-roading. I have been off-roading in a Defender 110, and it is a super capable vehicle that I believe is really only limited by its tires. You cannot get like a mud terrain tire on the Defender, at least from Land Rover. You could probably do it on the aftermarket. And with that amazing electronic air suspension that can provide like 2.8 inches of lift, you can really get over pretty much any obstacle, especially your parking lot in Beverly Hills or Windermere, Florida, wherever you live, wherever you're rich enough to own a Defender. You're gonna have plenty of off-road capability. And if you want to tow with the Defender, it does offer really nice 8,200 pounds of towing. That is a really good number. So if you do have a boat to pull behind you, it'll do that just fine. Overall, I still love the Land Rover Defender. I don't think that the 130 really changes the driving experience all that much. So if you really wanted a Defender and the 110 just wasn't big enough for you to fit your family, this 130 offers everything you loved about the Defender, just a little bigger. Now at this point in the video, you're probably either sold and saying, I'm gonna get the Defender 130 over the 110 because I need the extra space, or I've convinced you that the Defender 110 is probably enough Defender for you. But let's go ahead and make that decision even a little bit more complicated by talking about pricing. Now, a base Defender 130S is going to start at $69,100. That is a whopping $8,500 more than the Defender 110S, which remember has a 4-cylinder engine rather than an inline six, but they do produce about the same amount of horsepower. So you can get a Defender 110S starting at $60,600. And if it were my money, there is no way that I would be spending the $8,500 extra on the Defender 130. If I really wanted a Land Rover with a usable third row, I'd probably look at the Land Rover Discovery, or I would get the 3-row version of the Range Rover, which I just think is a better people carrier. Now, this Defender First Edition that I've tested was about $92,725 as tested, so these do get pretty pricey. You can get that V8 engined Defender 130 that I mentioned for just over 116 grand. So it is quite a lot of money for this Defender 130, and I'm going to go ahead and equivocally tell you that I think that if you want the Defender, you should probably just go for the 110. It does have a third row that fits 2 people. Again, it's not a very big third row, but it's useful in a pinch, and then you should probably get something else if you need a more practical people hauler. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this look at the Land Rover Defender 130. For more videos like it, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to be alerted of our latest videos. And if you want to read more about the Land Rover Defender, be sure to check out carbuzz.com. I'll see you next time.